Hello and welcome to the Nine Sports Podcast Soccer Edition. My name is Kathleen Gier and I am back for another week with you. And yes, it is me, even though I found my contacts this week and decided to wear those. Last week we had Annie Peterson on the show. She is our Soccer Monday columnist over at the Nine Sports and also works with the Associated Press covering women's soccer in the NWSL, U.S. Women's National Team, and beyond. She works so hard but does just really incredible work covering women's soccer, and we are so lucky to have her here working with us at the Nine. We also just had a lot of fun last week. We talked about Trinity Rodman reporting and kind of where that stood with the league, which we'll be able to update today, and then kind of rounded up the year for the U.S. Women's National Team and just talked about where the sport is kind of headed as we go into 2026. Another fun thing that we're doing at the Nine Sports is Women's Sports Daily, which comes out every weekday morning. And that is kind of your 5-minute daily recap of the biggest headlines in sports. And that does go beyond the 3 sports that we're covering here at the Nine Sports Podcast, to pull in, NCAA volleyball, which we're all watching, and softball and track and field and swimming, and just everything that you want to know about and that you want to catch up on, before you jump back into that group chat for the day. That is on a different feed, but Stephanie Kaloy and Chelsea Late do a phenomenal job with that. So go ahead and search wherever you listen for Women's Sports Daily and subscribe to that for just kind of that little jolt in the morning. I've really been enjoying it. And again, they're doing such a good job. Today for our number one at the Nine, it's more Trinity Rodman talk. Surprise. She is just the story right now, I feel like, in especially North American women's soccer. So many things are tied up into that with CBA negotiations and, compensation, and really just a lot of eyes on these negotiations right now, especially if you've listened to Women's Sports Daily or the basketball edition of the Nine Sports Podcast, as they go through some similar conversations over on the WNBA side. So Annie, in her story of the week, in our soccer story of the week, Annie Peterson broke down the timeline, starting with Commissioner Jessica Berman's comments at NWSL Championship Media Day, into kind of this week's big news, which was broken by Jeff Kassouf of ESPN, where the NWSL Board of Governors approved a new roster mechanism to pay star players over the salary cap. So that will allow up to $1 million over the salary cap for high-impact players, is kind of the phrasing that they're using. And who qualifies for that? They're still kind of deciding, but it's going to be, I think, in practice, pretty similar to what they're doing on the MLS side, to keep kind of those star players here. So it'll probably involve things like rankings on Ballon d'Or, appearances on the NWSL Best 11, U.S. Women's National Team caps, and then the other big piece is the player's commercial profile. So for somebody like Trin, that's obviously, just her recognizability and how active she is on social and just how engaged people are following her. And so theoretically, this would retroactively be considering players like Naomi Gerbo or Alyssa Thompson, who have made that jump to Chelsea in the last year, but would certainly kind of be in that same tier, at least in my mind, given the fact that they both signed for over $1 million in their individual deals with Chelsea. And so where we stand right now, and these are all, again, numbers from Jeff, salary cap in 2025 was $3.5 million, including revenue share. And that was based on like a 22-player roster. That CBA was signed in 2024 and says the cap would increase from 3.3 million up to 5.1 by 2030. So there are also a bunch of clauses in there, which is kind of the big debate right now, saying that the NWSL, with approval from the NWSLPA, does have the option to increase that at any point. And so that's kind of where people were really pushing Commissioner Berman on that championship media day. But I have a couple of quotes from her that I wanted to share here. So I will switch over to that now.
We want those top players here in the NWSL, and particularly we want Trinity in the NWSL, and we will fight for her. And we are excited in the championship on Saturday. I'll go back to what I said in my opening remarks, and in particular in response to the question from ESPN. We really believe that there is a holistic picture that players evaluate, and the reason we believe this is because we hear it from players in our league and around the world. I go and sit with the players on every single team in the NWSL every season, and they tell me that yes, compensation matters, but they also think about compensation not just from the perspective of what their club is paying them, but also from the league's perspective. We actually at the league, and I believe we might be one of the only league that actually pays players for performance. So there is that component. We also know that our market here in the US has more interest in supporting female athletes and women's sport than any other market in the world. And then there's all of the other components outside of compensation, which I referenced earlier, the other 3 C's, which is the competition, the club, and the coaching. And we believe on a holistic basis, if you're a player who wants to be performing at your best and wants to be valued and supported and feel like you have the opportunity to train in the best-in-class environment with a best-in-class league, that the NWSL is the place for you.
So she says some really interesting things there, right? Right before this quote, she had been talking about parity and how, some people could really see that as a negative, but she sees it as a positive, kind of showing off the level of competition in this league and the fact that as a fan or a player, you can come into any season thinking your team at least has a chance. And I think a big part of that, is obviously something that they're using as a battle for the importance of keeping that salary cap in place and where it is. But the fact of the matter is, as salaries are going up around the world, they're going to have to find a way to compete. And they're not going to be able to compete under this current model, especially with the USL Super League trying to make moves, as well as those international markets. And, as we're starting to see, there's some international owners getting involved in NWSL and people who own multiple teams across multiple leagues. And that's going to be, I think, another really interesting piece of this. But I'm still honestly a little surprised that Berman, was so direct talking about Trinity and the importance of keeping her in this league. I definitely think that losing a couple of those big names the last few years has hurt. And Trinity has been, like we said last week with Annie, such an important face of this league. She's young, she's fun, she does the TikTok dances with fans, and she's so incredibly talented. And, I think another thing that makes her case unique is that she is young and has dealt with some relatively significant recurring injuries. And so I think that that's another piece that perhaps makes the money more important up front, where we're talking about somebody whose career worst case scenario could be unexpectedly short, especially if you're dealing with kind of those back or leg injuries. And we see how hard she plays and how brutal this calendar can be, especially as we get ready to head into another World Cup cycle here in 27. So I am definitely interested to see where this lands. The NWSLPA grievance has not been settled yet, so that's still at the core of this. And then she's also a free agent, as Annie points out. And so even if, we make a concession at the league level, that she still has to reach that agreement individually with a team, probably Washington, but another weird question mark at the end of Annie was bold enough to give her kind of personal advice last week, and I guess I'll try it too, since we're here on a podcast. But I think that this is obviously a conversation that she really needs to have with the people close to her and her agents and all of that. I personally enjoy seeing her in the NWSL. I think we all do. And I think she brings, again, a lot of fun, a lot of talent to this league. She gives us somebody to follow. and really kind of root for. And I think this league it's in such an interesting position because people have team allegiances, but then with the structure of it at the base, feeding into the national team or feeding into several national teams, I think you have a lot of different ways to have a player allegiance, which makes this a uniquely fun structure as opposed to, a league that's maybe more specifically American and North American, like the WNBA. That's also just a very small roster size as well. On a personal level, I do think that the injury and injury history is a really intriguing piece. And at my core, I'm a girl's girl, and I'm going to say, go get your bag, and do what's best for you. And, that may be going to another league, making a little bit more money there, and coming back in a few years, or kind of balancing that however she needs to. I think we will all be extremely invested in the next few weeks or days or hours, or maybe they even announce this before you listen to the podcast. Again, always a risk with publishing times, but I think we'll all be really invested in what this means, not only for Trin, but what this means for the league and those other kind of high profile players, especially with such a young U.S. women's national team, or at least all these players that Emma's bringing into camp, that could be in this position in the next few months, years, trying to make that decision as this league continues to grow, as this league adds expansion teams, and just kind of enters this new chapter of competition. As I promised, we will also jump over to the WSL, where Khadija Shah, Bunny Shaw, had a marvelous weekend. She had 4 goals in Man City's win against Aston Villa. That was 6-1. She scored twice in each half and really easily actually passed that 100 goal mark, blew right past it. She now has 103 and is third all time against WSL scorers, which is just a crazy stat. My friends over at the Shades of Blue Network shared a really fun little chart showing the Golden Boot race, and she has 12 goals, 2 penalty goals, and the next 5 players are tied with 5 goals. So just showing again how dominant she has been. And I mean, that includes Stina Blackstenius, Alessia Russo. I mean, these are big names, and she is coming up really, really big. And, another one of those players, as we've talked about in the first couple of weeks of this pod, coming off an injury, really trying to kind of find her place, but doesn't feel like she missed a beat, even though, she missed that playoff run with the fractured foot. She has come back strong. She has come back so impressive. And she has been a vital piece to this Man City team that is now 6 points ahead of Chelsea for the lead in the WSL. I am hoping in the next few weeks to get a couple of my friends from Shades of Blue or Shea Butter FC onto this pod. And if you guys aren't familiar with them, definitely look them up. They do a great job, and their podcasts are just a ton of fun. I've joined your face over there. Finally, over in the NWSL, obviously the season is over, so players are negotiating new contracts or they are kind of exploring their options through the league. A couple of those big signings this week: goalkeeper Casey Murphy decided to sign with Boston Legacy. They signed her through 29, so look for her to be a really big kind of leadership and experience piece for this expansion franchise. They also picked up Hannah Stambaugh, so we will see how they kind of battle that out. Lots of goalkeepers specifically on the move this week. Chicago, I think, in one of the biggest and maybe slightly surprising ones, re-signed Alyssa Nair. I think we have all been kind of waiting for a big decision from her, but it's not like she hasn't already, cemented her place in Chicago history, NWSL history, U.S. women's soccer history. But a couple of last landmarks for her to hopefully hit on the way out. She has been just such a joy to watch throughout her career, and really rooting for UNC in what's probably her last go around in the league. That is it for me today, guys. Make sure you tune in later this week for our hockey edition and our basketball edition. And then we might have a special surprise for you at the end of the week, kind of a year-round wrap-up as we head into these final few weeks of 2025. Have fun, stay safe, and I will see you soon.